Hey, everybody, welcome back to Recovery Hacks. Now, for today's episode, I am going to give you some pointers for how to effectively navigate through those moments when somebody says or does something that feels really hurtful or offensive. I'm sure you can all think of times where you felt offended by something that somebody said, whether it was an off the cuff comment or a direct insult. There are definitely times where people can do or say things that really can hurt our feelings. And what can often happen then is it can kind of send our own mind and emotional system into a tailspin. And sometimes that can be the perfect setup for the urge to binge. So instead of turning to food for some temporary nervous system regulation, I'm going to walk you through a system that you can do for yourself to learn from these moments where you're feeling hurt or offended. Because the truth is, anytime we feel triggered or activated by something outside of us, it's really showing us something inside of us that needs to be healed. Okay. So if you are not in a super Zen mode about something and you're feeling reactive, triggered, upset, it's because there's something in you that this is tapping into and that needs to be healed. Now, I guess the bad news of that is we probably all have ongoing healing to be doing because we're humans, we get reactive to different things. But the good news is that our environment is really just showing us the next piece of work that we can do within ourselves. And today's hack is going to walk you through 5 very concrete steps for how to do that so that you don't have all of this stuff get activated and jumbled up inside and then turn to food for some temporary relief, which we know ultimately comes with a big price tag, right? So for today's episode, I'm going to use the example of a hurtful or offensive comment that some of you may have heard in your own lives, and that is, "You're so thin-skinned." How many of you have heard that or some version of that? I have so many clients who have a complex around their sensitivity because they've been told their whole lives that they're too thin-skinned and they need to get a thicker skin and they need to not get hurt by so many things. And so we're going to use that example to walk through these 5 steps. Okay, so let's pretend that that's the hurtful or offensive thing that has been said to you. Certainly think of something maybe in your recent past or something that's been a prevalent wound for you in the form of a comment that somebody else says. And let's go through these 5 steps. Okay. So somebody says to you, "You're so thin-skinned," you feel yourself get kind of reactive to that and your feelings get hurt. Okay. So the first step is to ask yourself, do I believe them? Is there some part of me that believes what this person is saying? Now, here's the deal. If somebody says something to you and you have a reaction to it, your reaction is coming from the fact that there is already a part of you inside that kind of believes what they're saying. So you can kind of look at their comment as like scratching an already existing wound inside of you. Okay. Now, on the flip side, if somebody says something to you and it just rolls off your back and you could care less and you feel really detached from that comment, and you're like, You can think whatever you want, but I know that's not true." It's because there's no part of you that already holds that belief. Okay. So the first question, the first step is, do I believe them? And if your answer is yes, or even a maybe, all right, then you're going to move to step 2, because what that's showing us is that their comment is touching something that's already alive inside of you. Okay. So step number 2 then is asking yourself, what does this say about me as a person? Or what is my belief around this comment? So for this particular example of "you're so thin-skinned," what does this say about me as a person? Well, it probably says that I'm already holding a belief that I'm too sensitive. Okay, so I already kind of harbor that belief. And then this person is like adding fuel to the fire by insulting me by saying I'm too thin skinned. Okay, so step number 2 is, what does this say about me as a person? Figure out what your belief is that kind of lines up with the hurtful or offensive comment. Okay, step number 3, do I want to believe this? So in this example, do I want to believe that I'm too sensitive? Okay. And this is an important step because it's not a definite no. Sometimes if we're really honest with ourselves, there could actually be some benefit or payoff to believing this negative thing about ourselves. So get very, very real with yourselves. Okay. But if your answer is no, I really don't want to believe that I'm too sensitive, and I certainly don't want to believe that I'm too thin skinned, then we're going to move on to step number 4. Okay. Step number 4 is, what do I want to believe instead? Okay. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip for how to identify what you want to believe instead. And this is going to align with the inner child work that Dr. Julie and I so often talk about in the deeper work episodes. And the way that you can figure out what you want to believe instead is to go back into your early years of life and think about, what is it that you wished you had heard from your caregivers about this particular issue. So for this example, we're talking about sensitivity and being thin-skinned. So when you were a younger person, what did you wish you could have heard from your caregivers about your emotional sensitivity and being thin-skinned or thick-skinned? Okay, so in this example, it might be something like, your emotions are wonderful. Okay, or it might be, your sensitivity is one of the most beautiful things about you. Okay, so really tap into, what did your little child inside crave hearing from your parents, your caregivers, the people who were just so influential in your life? What do you wish they would have said to you about whatever the issue is that you're working through? Okay, that's going to be the most impactful way to determine, what do I want to believe instead? All right, because we can kind of identify that up here in our logical brain, but I really want to bring you down into the emotional aspect of this. And the way that we do that is we tap into our inner child. Our inner child is still waiting to hear these beautiful affirmations, to hear the validation. Okay, and in this example, the validation is, your emotions are wonderful. I love your sensitivity. That's one of your superpowers. Don't ever stop being sensitive. It's beautiful. Wouldn't that have been nice to have heard? Okay. Once you identify what it is that you want to believe coming from that inner child perspective, then your fifth and final step, and you guys have heard me say this a lot, is to start saying those things to yourself. Okay. This is what we call affirmations, right? You guys have heard me talk a lot about this because there's so much power in what we say to ourselves. So we can either repeat the dismissive, sometimes bullying language that we got when we were younger. We can continue that legacy by talking to ourselves in the same way now, or we can be very intentional and say, no, I'm going to give my inner child what he or she has always longed to hear. I'm going to start saying those affirmations. And just last week's recovery hack was about how to use your cell phone to remind yourself of these affirmations. But there's a lot of different ways you can do affirmations. I always have post-it notes. I've got some right now at my desk, post-it notes of new affirmations that I'm wanting to embody. Sometimes I'll put them on my bathroom mirror, or I'll put them on my nightstand, places where I'll see them regularly. And definitely using my cell phone, like I said last week, because we want to practice, practice, practice. The more you start saying these affirming, validating things to your inner child, the more they become your truth. And that brings us into a full circle moment where the next time somebody does or says something that is related to this issue, whatever it might be. In this case, we're talking about emotional sensitivity and being too thin skinned. You're going to find that their words don't hurt as much. They don't offend you as much. Not because they've changed, because you've changed, because you are repairing that wound inside of yourself that kind of sort of believed it, right? And as you repair that, you're now less vulnerable to being affected by their words. And this is the greatest form of empowerment, because it does not depend on anybody else changing, because they may or may not ever do that. The power is entirely in your hands to heal the wound inside of you, so that whatever's going on outside of you is no longer wounding. Okay. And so as you continue to heal these wounds, then you find you go through your days and you're not really offended by much. You're not reactive to a whole lot. which is a very peaceful, calm, centered, grounded, loving place to be. And then guess what? Your psyche does not need for coping. Of course, it doesn't need binge eating or any of the other vices that you might rely on. Okay, so you can see how this is a very empowering and healing cycle to work with yourself. So anytime you are having a reaction to something outside of you, don't get caught in the reaction. Recognize that this is an opportunity to go deeper within yourself and heal whatever that external thing is touching inside. Okay. So, a real quick review of the steps. First is when something feels hurtful or offensive, I want you to ask yourself, do you believe them? Because on some level, somewhere inside, there's a part of you that's resonating with their words. That's why you're having a reaction to it. So, yes or maybe. Step number two, what does this say about you as a person? What do you believe about yourself? Okay. If you believe them, what is your version of that, right? So you believe them when they say you're so thin-skinned, and then your version of that is, yeah, I'm just too sensitive, right? The third step is, do I want to believe that? No. The fourth step is, so what do I want to believe instead? Go back in time to that inner child part of you. What was he or she longing to hear from your caregivers relative to this concept? And then the fifth and most important step is start affirming yourself with those words today. Repeat it over and over and over and over again. You guys have all heard it takes about 28 days to create a new habit. The same is true with our thoughts. So it will take about a month of constantly practicing a new way of thinking, okay, before it starts to become a belief. But that's not that long, right? A month to change your life is not that long. So practice, practice, practice. And then you will find that moving forward, their words and their actions are a lot less hurtful and offensive. It's very, very exciting. Okay. So, as always, I love it when you guys pop your comments below with insights that you get from the video. If you try it out and you have an experience with it, please share that. You guys have such a beautiful collective wisdom when you put all of your thoughts and feelings and experiences together. So let's share, share, share so that we can all learn from each other. Okay. I'm excited to hear from you guys. All right. So that's your hack for this week. Write down those 5 steps and start practicing them. And actually get excited about people doing or saying things that hurt your feelings or offend you, because now you are discovering what else needs to be healed inside. So you can thank them. I know I sound crazy, but you can actually thank them. Thank you for saying that. That actually offended me. And now I know where I can do more healing. So thank you for that. It's kind of a different way to look at it, right? Okay, guys, have an awesome week. I'll see you back here for yet another hack next Saturday. Bye-bye.